we have a problem of shooting our wounded.
Mm-hmm.
And that means as soon as something isn't quite right, we don't help, we don't support, we just give you the boot.
I'm going to push on you a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I believe that I know where your heart is on this, but I'm gonna just let you work through this with me so that we can all work through it together.
Okay.
I believe your heart is to heal men, right? And I think that there's definitely a need for that among the laity of men. But I think that the Bible so clearly outlines the qualifications for pastors. And my worry is that we can tend towards overwhelming grace rather than caution when it comes to the pastorate and people serving in the church. How would you talk to that?
I wrote 2 chapters in the book regarding how pornography impacts those in ministry leadership. But we have a problem. We have a problem of shooting our wounded. And that means as soon as something isn't quite right, we don't help, we don't support, we just give you the boot, right? Or we do the opposite where, oh, God's grace is always sufficient. Let's just pray over this and you're back in ministry. Neither of those kinds of reactions are really what God has called the church to be.
Amen.
And what does God call the church to be? He calls us to follow him.
Right.
As Paul said, follow me as I follow Christ. I'm giving an example for you. Well, that's what the church overall needs to be. Now, you're like, well, Sam, that means we need to immediately outcast that person. Don't let them have anything to do with the church. And what we're really being called to do is call up people who are fallen and broken and hurting to a relationship and deep discipleship to follow Christ with every part of their being. Now, let me see if I can give you a couple of illustrations here. I think that'll help. I was speaking at a denominations ministry conference, and one of the pastors who had invited me said, Sam, I wanted to make sure you were here because you see, I'm supposed to be retired now. And we invited another pastor to come in, and we were going to co-pastor for a while, but it turned out he was struggling with pornography. And so we disqualified him. He's out. But you know, Sam, he said that he had been exposed to pornography at 8 years old, and that had rooted itself in adolescence. Would that have any impact on him? And so when we're missing the very basics of why do people get stuck in the first place, and I'm a little off track, but I got to tell you this before we move on. The 3 common threads that we see over and over, these 3 common factors we see again and again: early exposure to pornography, ongoing use and repetition, especially through adolescence, but can happen later in life too. And number 3, some trauma or pain that has happened early in life, but can happen as later as well. And so pornography actually rewires the brain to crave it more and more. With that acting out and that repetition, the early exposure is very impactful. We'll come back and we'll talk about this more fully.
Sure.
So when we understand those kinds of things, then we say, here's a ministry leader who's come in and wants to serve. And why do most ministry leaders want to serve? Because they have felt pain and brokenness in their lives, and God has moved in a miraculous way in that. And they are excited, and they don't want to see other people hurt. They want to see other people find some of that restoration, that saving, that soul saving blood redemption that only comes through Christ, right?
Right.
But sometimes they haven't dealt with many of the wounds and pains and impact in their lives. Nor have they, when they went through seminary, did they get any help or support with this concept or find real wholeness. Right. And so they started out in middle school, and they said, when I get to high school, I'm going to be around more mature people and this will just go away. And that didn't work. And so they go to a Christian college and they think, well, I'm going to be around other Christians, and so I won't want to use pornography. It won't have any impact on me there. And that doesn't work. And they say, well, I'm going to seminary, and at seminary, I'm going to be around the most, amazing people and around the most thoughtful and respected professors and teachers and instructors. And so I won't have to struggle with it there. But seminary doesn't deal with this issue as well. And so, when I go into the mission field, or I go to a church and help support the pastor there, I'll be around the even more dedicated people. And what they find is they're as a missionary in a foreign land with a different culture, with all kinds of stresses and struggles and pain and anxieties. And so all the stresses that around our ministry leaders that we just pile on them today.
Right.
And we just say, hey, you just deal with all that stress. Surely you only do something on Sunday morning, right? You don't do anything else, or a Wednesday night, whatever it is. And the stresses and the triggers and the pain that comes through that ministry, and they've never been able to deal with, how do I cope with those things well?
Right. When
they have learned and trained their brain, their mind, body, and spirit, that when stress gets too much, when a pain gets too much, when I doubt my self-worth, there's an escape called pornography that I can run to.
This episode of Rapid Response was brought to you by CTC Math. Visit them at ctcmath.com today.